Welcome to Fire Night's video, our second master series. I do believe this is the 70th video in our second master series, the 19th video in our basic processors, and the 6th video in our reverb convolution. So basically, the last video, I really hope that you sat and thought about that and started trying to work that out. That is something that you're going to have to work on that's going to be integral into you mastering this next biggest gun, being your convolution reverb and the application of it. I wanted to kind of go a step farther with this, that this concept can be looked at as there's two parts of this concept. The first part of this concept is I had talked a little bit about in the last video, that things sitting on top of the mix, you can add more reverb and more bodybuilding to than stuff farther back in the mix. So, a good example like that, if I chose this medium hall, that, on the out front vocal, I might choose this C50 size, but as I go farther back in the mix, I start using smaller sizes and less amount of them, because of the focus is on the things out front. So if I want it to seem like there's more reverb, I will focus on the things sitting out front, because the perception will be that there's more reverb across the mix without adding a lot of mud. And be real careful of things in the lower end. Things in the lower end you got to be real careful with, because it immediately can cause you a muddy mess. Whether you're doing bodybuilding or you're doing spatialization, go light and be careful. I really wanted to drive that home. And the next thing is your process in your stages. So an example of this, let's give an example. So this really drives home and how you need to practice this, and it might be different in different situations. Let's take a group of cellos. And so that way we have individual tracks, a subgroup with a subgroup bus that's going to the main bus that's going to go to another reverberation bus before it goes to the main out, like I talked about in my first master series. So we go to this cello, and it's an individual cello in the subgroup. We do our bodybuilding on it. Sounds great, thick, lush, rich, full of presence, and just, yeah, dude. We've added how much ever we're going to add of our spatialization to it that we've decided upon, depending on where it's at in the mix, front or back. And we've added how much we want of that. Sounds great individually. Okay, now we do that to each one of those in that subgroup. Then each one of those individualities in that subgroup go to a subgroup bus. So I might want to add a little bit of bodybuilding to that subgroup bus and a little bit of this preset that we've decided in this medium hall, let's say, to that subgroup to try to glue it together a little bit or make it sound like it's in that space more. Now, this has a couple problems. The first problem, this can cause over-processing of your bodybuilding, causing that thick, rich, lush, rich, full, present sound, and putting it into space. So you may, first thing is you might want to go really light there to add very little amounts of it so that you don't cause a muddy mess. Second of all, you might want to go back after you've finished, go back to those individual tracks and lighten up on them. That means you might want to go add a little bit less bodybuilding and a little bit less spatialization of reverb to each one of those individual tracks, so you can add a little bit in the subgroup bus to try to fatten up everything in that subgroup and help glue everything together in that space. Now, the concept here, there's a couple problems. The first problem, this can start to cause mud, and it's something that really is going to take time for you mastering, becoming that next master audio engineer, so that you don't make a mess using your convolution reverb. The other concept is as you add more of each one of those at different stages, say the individual tracks, the subgroup bus, and the main reverb bus before you go out on the mix, is that each time at each stage of one of those three stages that you're adding more. So it's multiplying things again. So that is multiplying that sound. It's like adding more impulse responses and any frequency content comes back that's adding more of a chance of you causing a muddy mess. So you have to really think about how much you're adding and really pay attention to it. And let's say you get done with the individual tracks, you go to the subgroup, and then you go to the main mix reverb bus, that you're going back there. So if I want to add a little bit across the whole mix, because I've done all this work on these individual tracks and these subgroups, but I want to add a little bit more to the whole mix, you might want to have to go back to those individual tracks, back off a little bit on each one of those individual tracks. You might want to back off a little bit on each one of those subgroups so that you can add a little bit to the whole mix to try to glue things together, or to thicken up that thin runny soup, that your vocals sound good, but it could use a little bit more gluing the piano together, or the sitar, or the guitar part, or the backing vocals. So you want to add a little bit more of the whole mix to try to glue it together, or fatten it up and thicken up that thin running soup to where it sounds like a nice thick stew. But that means you might have to go back to the individual tracks, to the subgroups, and back off a little bit the work you did there. I know this sounds frustrating, and it is. For you to become that next level master audio engineer, at each one of those stages, the individual tracks, the subgroup buses, and when you process for the whole mix, that process is very delicate. And I know that sounds funny, but this being your next biggest gun, if you don't see it that way, you will never master it, because it will master you. You will lose control of your environment. You will lose control of your clarity of your mix, and you will get frustrated. You will get mad, and you will stop improving. So the biggest answer that I have most of the time is to think about what I've told you and go light. When you start out with those individual tracks, go light. You might think you would add more, but hold on. You're gonna still got the subgroup bus. Even if you're dealing with just the vocals, that you've doubled the tracks, and that you're gonna make a subgroup bus off those two tracks, that you've either doubled the tracks, or you've got two different captures with two different microphones. They're going to go to a subgroup, that vocal. You're going to might want to add a little bit more there of each bodybuilding and spatialization. And then you might want to add a little bit more later on when you do the whole mix. So go light there. Go light. I know it sounds funny because you think, well, no, I do those individual tracks and they sound great, and then I don't even fuss with the subgroup mix, and then I don't fuss with the main mix. Well, to some point, true. Because my old adage of watching these people call me up sometimes and they say, Bob just did the whole mix, and at the end of the mix he turned up did a little bit of cut at 500 hertz across the whole mix, and then his mix was perfect, and mine isn't. It's like, well, because he's a professional audio engineer, and he really has done some good work on the individual tracks, the subgroups themselves, and he knows that he just needed to do a little bit of work on the chorus, cutting a little bit around 500 hertz, because now in the whole mix that it's standing out a little bit, needs to kill it off in that area, because that way the mix sounds good, because you have to go deal with that. Now in the mix it's not sounding good. That's the same concept with reverberation. So reverberation in this concept is very hard to teach other than you understanding that. When you understand the concepts that I've talked about in the last two videos, this video and the one before, really well, and that concept really sinks in, that you are well on your way to going, wait a minute, I better think about this. This tool is like an aircraft carrier. In your arsenal as an audio engineer, and you're in the Navy, this tool is like an aircraft carrier, okay? It just is. You have to see it that way, and your usage of it better be that way, because it is very important in your strategic implementation of your military strike, being your production, right? And you better see it that way, or it's going to shoot you. It's going to ruin your whole production. You might as well give it to the enemy and let them shoot you in the head, because it will very quickly make a mess out of things. As you go through those different stages, you going light, you can always go back and add a little bit more later. When you get to the end of the mix and that bus for your reverb bus on the end of the mix, and you're thinking, no, I can go back and add a little bit more bodybuilding to my piano, and I might be able to add a little bit more of the reverb of the impulse I've chosen, or I might change that impulse and add a little bit more to it. Yeah. All right. Understanding that is half the battle, because once you understand that you aren't trying to set yourself up to die in front of the mixing board, but you know that you're going to do this so that it doesn't become frustrating. As you go through, you start getting messed up, and you get that proverbial idiot that's a dead skeleton dying in front of the mixing board because he doesn't get it to his head that this is a process that you will go through. And as you become a better and better and better audio engineer, and you become a better and better audio engineer at using this next biggest gun you have as an audio engineer, you will get better at using it, and you will be more focused when you do use it on the individual tracks, on the subgroups, and on your main mix, so that you are doing that 3 steps forward, go back and go through it. Do I need to adjust anything? And go light as you go through it. You can always go back and add more. And to remember, in the end, if you add too much, it can just make a mess. Always remember that if you pull out, I mean, you take a really nice pop production. It's a really nice pop production. And I'm not trying to make everybody a pop fan or something, but a really nice pop production, a really good one, you know, from big name pop band that's top 40, just bam. And you listen to the production, listen for the spatialization, reverberations, things like that. You don't really hear it that much, but it just sounds spot on. It sounds full, thick, lush, rich, and da 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 da. And a lot of those individuals aren't even utilizing these techniques that I'm trying to tell you that much, you know, because things are changing rapidly in the industry to techniques like bodybuilding are just starting to come out as a sound sculpting tool to help you make things sound thick, lush, rich, full with presence that aren't taught a lot. So as these things come along, things will get better. But even them, they sound great. Even ones from the 70s and 80s, some of them sound awesome, bro. You know, and they didn't have half the tools or the understanding that we have now to make these productions and workflows go this way so that we can come out with these top-notch productions and top-notch workflows and honing our abilities as engineers to understand this as we go through this, especially with this tool. I've seen so many people that do not see this tool as their next biggest gun because they don't understand how powerful it is, how much power you have there to take your sound sculpting and take your equalization and that beautiful capture and just make it sound thick, rich, lush, full with huge amounts of presence, and just make it sound like it's in this really cool space to glue things together, but preserving identity, to just make it have this sound in the mix that is the difference between using it in any way, shape, or form and not utilizing it. And how it can destroy the mix also by not taking the time to master it. So I really hope I made that clear, and I hope that caused you to go back and start practicing it and utilizing it in that way. Take those things into consideration so that you can master your usage of it and the things we talked about in the last couple of videos to really help you become that next level master audio engineer when you're using your next biggest gun, being your Convolution reverb. Peace, hope, love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.